Hey there, and thank all of you for everything. This has been a great gathering. I want to take a moment to thank Megan Green Roberts, who I think I took to lunch 8 years ago, maybe. Asked her if she would consider helping us out, and she said yes. And I told her at the time something that I had seen before, and I've seen ever since, that she has considerable grace in the tradition of others who've been in that office. I'm looking at one of them back there with a big hat. Megan has been steadfast in ways you wouldn't imagine, always with a smile, always with the courage of a smile, and with a lot of brains. And now I'm going to step aside because there are other people with brains who have maybe even more confirming things to say. Let's see.
I'm not nervous up here. I'm just dumbfounded because that's the first time Wyatt's ever said I had brains. Megan, where are you at? Raise your hand. There you are. I grew up in Charleston. No, I didn't. I lived in Charleston, and I wish I grew up in Charleston. And they have in kitchens there. They have these little embroidered notes that say, "The perfect hostess is like a duck, calm on the surface and paddling like hell underneath." And I know as much as anyone just how hard that Megan has paddled for all of us year in and year out, and has as we come together, she has set the tone for warmth and grace and just so many things. And I haven't even processed the fact that she's leaving. I don't know what it's going to be like to walk in the office and she's not there. But I know that we all have so much to thank her for and taking care of us. And so it's taken that gratitude from all of us. Like, Shelby, come on up. We have a gift. We have a gift for you. And we put together a thank you box to anyone else that wants to add something in. There's a box in there to put notes in as well. Megan, come on up.
I'm completely unprepared for this, and I like to walk up here with my clipboard and notes. Wow, that's totally surprising. I don't have anything to say. Thank you. I love you all. I got here this afternoon and realized that I could recognize all of your laughs from behind. You're my tribe, and I love you, and I will miss you, and I'll see you soon.
In the words of Katy Perry, just why are y'all laughing? Just because it's over doesn't mean it's really over. It's a good song. So we have shuttles that are going to be transporting you from your dorm to the inn where the big buses will take y'all to Nashville. So if you're on the 5:30 bus, the shuttle will leave from outside of your dorm at 5 a.m. They'll be doing rounds, but as best you can, get up at 5, be there for the shuttle, because you don't want to do that in walk, carrying your luggage. We also have, for the 8:30 bus, that shuttle or those shuttles start circling at 8. And again, if you don't know what bus you're on, then please find one of us on staff and we can help figure that out for you. So we have the photos by Miriam in boxes at either corner. Please go through those, and if you find one you like, talk to Miriam. After this, we have a party outside on the lawn. So let's end this thing with some dancing in Shakespeare's way, and raffle.
All right, for our last raffle is Adrian Heron's book, Catch Release, goes to Matthew Landsberg. And for Alicia Stallings' book, Like, goes to Sydney Doyle. Please join me in welcoming Alicia Stallings.
Thank you. I want to say thank you to everyone, to Wyatt, to Barbara. I want to thank, I usually sort of thank Adam and Megan and then kind of get nervous that I'm going to leave someone out. And I might. If I do, I owe you a book. Thank you, Wyatt and Barbara, Megan, Gwen, Kate, Adam, Norris, Amina, Brittany, B, Chris, Dan, Ananda, Sam, Nathaniel, Jonathan. Thank you so much for everything that you have done. I've missed someone. Oh no. And Hastings. Last but not least. It's been wonderful working with Mark Jarman. I've also had the pleasure of having workshops with Bob Hass and Charles Martin. It's wonderful to be here. As many of you know, I live in Greece. I have lived in Greece since 1999, where we say thank you, Ευχαριστώ. Which is also, as many of you will know, and perhaps suitable at Sewanee, is the root from which we get Eucharist, the great Thanksgiving. And I was trying to think of it, at its most metaphorical, most literal, is a breaking of bread and drinking of wine with friends. And we also, in Greek, have Ευχαριστούμε, which is we thank you, which is a nice variation. I am honored or freaked out to be at this spot reading at the conference, both. And I was going to read this last, but someone else had another suggestion for something to read last, so I will, as others, read my Wyatt tribute first. So yes, Adam Ross said we're going to do an issue of the review, and do you have some vignettes or thoughts about the conference? And I sort of freaked out and I didn't know what to do. And finally I was like, could I just do it in verse? And he said, yeah, we would prefer that. So yeah, here we go. I got a call from Adam Ross, or rather message from the blue. Had I a tale I'd like to gloss, some 700 words would do, about my sometime summer boss. A sort of festschrift cum review in honor of director Wyatt. Could it be verse? Okay, I'll try it. For 30 years, there's been a spot upon the Cumberland Plateau where writers gather when it's hot and sometimes when it rains to show each other how to write or not. For poets are just born, not made. That's why the Argo Irks shop manuscripts around and workshop. Wait, did I mention 30? 30 years of the conference going strong. Some poets died before that. Shirley Shelley did not last that long, and poor John Keats, who had been flirty with Fanny Brown and wrote a song or two. Throw Byron in the mix. Still got him in. who bowed out only 36. Of course, it's not just poets. Others work in essays, plays, and stories, would-be musicians, some by druthers, and many wreathed in laureled glories, medals, and prizes. Ask their mothers. And look at their back inventories. All of the genres there must be, so says the will of Tennessee. I've seen some summers, maybe 7, a scholar once, those many years ago. Sewanee seemed like heaven, like summer camp without the tears, or tears sometimes. A kind of leaven to helpful edits from our peers. I've heard the banjos on the porches as lightning bugs lit tiny torches. Soon faculty and fellows gather, a herd of cats perhaps, while staff arrange the bar. All are a blather. It's time to take that photograph. Some sit on chairs, others would rather sit on the ground. Don't talk, don't laugh, Miriam warns. Beneath tall oaks, Dick Bausch goes right on cracking jokes. Oh God. You are so big. Then there's a writer's talk on craft. Some clever, funny, wise, or dark. On plot or rhyme, on the first draft, on how to end or to embark. My talk's on nothing, Mark Strand laughed. He spoke on nothing, left his mark in 20 brilliant minutes done. A blizzard of naught, 1 minus 1. I think it's craft talks I like best. And though I've sat through many a reading that put the Sitzfleisch to the test, the joy in others was exceeding. I think how Hollander would rest and snore right in the first row seating. He co-taught then with Rachel Haddis, a master class, and it was badass. Those were the days when scholars flocked not to the French house, but instead to Rebel's Rest, and talked long after faculty went to bed, but nobody could rest. It rocked. You're drunk. Go home, the poet said to younger poets with a frown. Now Rebel's rests at rest, burned down. The staff alone are on a par with faculty in terms of writing, although they might be tending bar or other problems less exciting, and each one is a rising star and makes the conference more inviting. Let's face it, don't we one and all with bated breath await the call? The conference is a place apart. It's down to generosity of time, of food and drink and art, of lectures about prosody and words that issue from the heart, but at art's weird velocity. In nothing does the conference scrimp. Yes, I'll have more of Barbara's shrimp. And all the vision of a poet, a Navy man who once played ball and has the shoulder now to show it. Imposing, being rather tall and erudite, but don't you know it, with a wry sense of wit withal. I hope I don't sound ubi sunti. Let's lift a toast to Wyatt Prunty. Yeah, so I was going to end with that. Not anymore. It's always wonderful to read here. Some of you may know, I actually have a quite longish history with Sewanee. I used to come here in like 1983 and 1984 as a music camp participant. So Sewanee has been very therapeutic to come here as a writer. I'm sure actually that music camp is what made me a writer. Because nothing will make you a writer so much as being a first desk, second chair, second violinist. It makes you rethink things. So I have many, many memories. And I came here as a scholar, a Tennessee Williams scholar, I believe, in 1999. And I roomed with the poet Paisley Rekdal, who many of you know her work, her wonderful book Nightingale, which is just out. And I was so excited. In fact, I mean, I was a grown-up. I won't go into ages, but I didn't need these. But my dad drove me up from Atlanta, and dropped me off at camp. It was just like going to camp. He drove me up, and I think we got a little lost, and he made some kind of gruff remark, like, they call this a writers' conference. They can't write directions. I'm sure that is not true, but I roomed with Paisley, and we came down to breakfast the first morning, and we were so excited. We'd been giggling together, and it was so much fun. And we were sitting at breakfast, which was so civilized. There was like the New York Times, and you were at these long tables with people, and we were like, "Who is your roommate?" And everyone would turn to us and say, for $50 more, you didn't have to have a roommate. And Paisley and I both was like, $50. We had the best time, and we are still very good friends. And it was a wonderful time. Min Jin Lee was there, all these people who are like famous. And I met JFK, and I see someone reading a book. I'm like, that's Min Jin Lee. I was at Sewanee with her. So it's been really wonderful to be here over many years. When I did get the call to come as faculty, that was a very strange experience. I was in Greece, and I pick up the phone, and Wyatt Prunty is talking to me in Wyatt Prunty voice. And, it's talking, and I, like many people, was sort of nervous. I was like, can we do it? I've got 2 small children. And he was like, everything is going to be fine. And just that welcoming, which I don't want to, well, yes, I will say it, is especially important for female faculty, I will just say, to have this family. To know that you can come with your kids. And in fact, my first reading here, a 4:15 slot, much to be desired. My son, who is here now he's getting nervous, was about 7. And as I was reading, kept approaching the dais with an attitude of despair, and eventually flung himself down, conquered by utter boredom. Keeps it real. I'm going to start with some new poems, which is risky, but it's why not? So this is a poem. I guess it's about swimming. I'm not sure. Getting in. Some people jump. Some people dive. Others, inch by inch, arrive and give themselves up to the chill piecemeal with a grudging will. First toes, then ankles tempt the cold, and backs of knees that tender fold, then thighs that start to pimple, blotch, a shock like ice that slaps the crotch, and slides up shivering past the hips and into the belly button slips. Elbows hitch higher till a ripple laps the aureole and nipple, sea urchin shells repoussé round. The armpits shrug until they're drowned. Now collarbone, now nape, now chin, and now, out of your depth, you're in. So let's try the new poems first while people are fresh. Daylilies. And again, this is actually, I'm hearkening back to when my now husband, and I lived in Sin in Clarkston, Georgia. We lived in John Crow Ransom's niece's basement. We lived next to a couple called the Hilberts, and our cat would sometimes wander over there and scare the birds, and we'd have to go after them. And Mrs. Hilbert would say, "Your husband was over here earlier." Daylilies. I remember them, a lifetime back, freckled orange, the way they grew feral by the railroad track, abundance in abandon, swarms on the embankment, graveled, steep. I'd pick some for a vase or 2 back then when I held beauty cheap, there for the taking in your arms. Each afternoon was thunderstorms, high dudgeon in the crowns of oak and umbrage clouds. Lightning would drop, and then 100 dishes broke, and just as quickly it would stop. A dripping piece, the sodden worms, birdsong in the treble wires, the clouds cerise with underfires. Is memory a kind of praise? Each day the same storm would unfold, and in post-thunder afternoons the afterlight was syrup gold, as one by one the flowers scrolled shut like jaundiced silk cocoons, and some plunked on the tabletop, those days ephemeral as days. We had some wonderful new poems show up in class today. We assigned new poems. I think it's actually Mark's idea to bring in. And as they were fantastic. So if there are any editors out there who need like 12 fantastic, brand new, just born poems, talk to our people. So we did a lot of forms. We did abecedarians. I'm going to read an abecedarian Iliad. Achilles, begin counting down. Even for godlike Hector, Ilium just Keane's lullabies. Mourn no orphans. Priam's quiet ransom settled. Today's unsung victory will extinguish yesterday's zeal. Someone was talking to me lately saying, you're really angry with Achilles. Yes, I am. So it's another Achilles poem. I'm working it through. So this one is not an episode. I guess it's sort of, I'm just rearranging the sounds of Achilles. You know, it's just a great name. So I'm not really just using the letters, I'm using the sounds. I'm cheating. It doesn't matter. I'm making up the rules. I'm the poet. Achilles. Ah, ill ease. All ails his sake, all hails his clash. Ask his likes, he lacks his lass. Alas, his law, his clause is cause. He slashes, slays, sacks. He classes his kills as skills. He slices clay. He seals his lease. I call his kisses alkali, his sex silk ashes. He's classical, his ilk. I see his case, his heel sick as lilies. He chases a shale sill. Hell is a chilly hall. Shaky isles, hazy as Hellas, keels, calls, ice, slakes his cells as lilacs cease. His ache heals all. That was fun. Achilles. I don't know if you have a suggestion. You know, titles are really not my forte. They're not. Yeah, this one's about Echo. It's called Echo. So. Echo. So there, you know, I guess you could read this in different ways, but I'm just one person, so I will do what I can. It's, you know, basically, yeah, Echo in the age of Me Too, I guess. But what isn't? What tales we tell, what tales, what ails, about the girls gone quiet yet, the storytelling ones once, who entertained the heart, art, till suddenly they ceased, eased. What makes the tongue inert, hurt? What turns the voice to swords, words, cutting the throat? What takes, aches, the name from alibi, of the body. We were stern. Turn. Stories, we said, are lies. Ice. We told her, don't repeat them. Eat them. So I do have some requests. I'm trying to find my requests. What's happened to my requests? I will find them. Okay. I'm making that sound that Tony Early described Alice McDermott making. All right. So this, for Amina. So this is uncollected, but maybe it needs to come in somewhere. Anyway, there was a point when we had moved to Greece, and I was in a sort of crisis, and I was reading a lot of biographies of poets, which is, I think, something that young poets do because you're trying to figure out how to live as a poet. And as a woman poet, it's upsetting because, Margaret Atwood, I think, says in an interview somewhere that she started really moved to novels because people were asking her not if, but when she was going to commit suicide. And obviously, Edna St. Vincent Millay has this very rich life. And I was reading whoever's read Savage Beauty, the biography of Savage Beauty, and it was a page turner, and I was so shocked. And really, thought it was really thrilling. And I would just turn to John and I was like, do you think I haven't led an interesting enough life? It's like, what are you reading? After reading the biography, Savage Beauty, I'd like to write sonnets, 12 a day, compose a libretto, and maybe a play. My lustrous red hair would be crowned with the bay if I were like Edna St. Vincent Millay. I'd like to have lovers, both straight ones and gay. I'd like to hold both sexes under my sway and not give two figs about what people say, like Edna St. Vincent Millay. I'd like to throw tantrums and get my own way. I'd like to be fresh as a young Beaujolais and slyly bewitching as Morgan Le Fay. Like Edna St. Vincent Millay. I'd move with the grace of one trained in ballet. My husband would not only love, but obey. People would flock to my readings and pay. If I were like Edna St. Vincent Millay. All right. Oh, do I keep with the sad poems? So many are sad. Dead dog poem? Dead dog poem? Dead bumblebee poem? Both. I don't know. Funeral of a bumblebee. I found a bumblebee who'd died. Its head was bowed, its torso curled, it lay tipped over to one side, here at the coda of the world. Its black wings, smooth as polished oars, were poised mid-stroke. An empty tower of silence droned as loud as snores that drowsed their way from flower to flower. Its sable fur was trimmed with gold. Its hands were folded to its chest. Let poppies close now, unconsoled, and 6 ants bear it to its rest. All right, I'll leave that dead dog poem. I've got others. So I will read, I will start with a poem from the books. It's my first book, which had just come out when it's 99, so it was the same year that I came here, and as a scholar. And I was in Hollander's and Rachel Hoddes' workshop, and I think this was probably workshopped. I probably didn't take the good advice I was offered. It was already in the book. I don't recommend that, but anyway, this is a very early poem, which I think will become clear, but it is very early. How the demons were assimilated and became productive citizens. The demons were more beautiful than the angels. They had no qualms about plastic surgery. They took to wearing black, which didn't show dirt in the city like innocence, which anyway couldn't be worn between Labor Day and Easter. They tired of grudging angels their gilded hair and had theirs done. Their complexions were so pale, the blonde looked natural, only more so. They shrunk their wings into fashionable tattoos, so cashmere suits draped better from their shoulders, elocution lessons turned hisses to lisps. The demons converted. They became Episcopalian. Name dropped high ups in the company of heaven. As for evil, it became too much trouble. The demons started to shirk the menial jobs which, like good deeds, took one among the poor and bruised the manicure of rose petal nails. They preferred to stand by and watch evil happen, or offended by odors and noise, even turned away. They had become so beautiful, even the angels who never looked in mirrors to comb their hair, afraid to be called vain, and never bought clothes, since the old ones didn't wear out, just got shabby, left the lovely demons to languish, dropping all charges on the spoiled creatures. They were that good. Read a couple of poems from Hapax. So with Hapax, which was the second book, I think I must have been pregnant because I had a conversation with my editor who was freaked out about the title Hapax because nobody knows what that means. And I was just determined and hormonal, and I was like, it's going to be beautiful, and everyone will be intrigued with the title that they don't know what it means. And it's going to have an H and an A and a P and an A and an X, and I got my way. And now everyone knows what it means. Oh, here's a dead dog. All right. They're haunting me. So when we were moved to Athens during a time of great optimism in Greece, we were fixing to enter the Euro, and that was going to be great. And we were looking forward to the 2004 Olympics, and new metro stations were being opened. Actually, the Athens Metro I think started the same year that the London Tube did, but it took so long to dig out stations because basically every station is an entire archaeological dig, and you're just, first of all, you knock over the Roman things and then the Byzantine things, and then there's an argument. But there was luckily none of my Byzantinologist friends here. But there was a wonderful exhibit of just all of the things they had been finding. And with museums, I love museums, but I like quirky and small museums. I get very overwhelmed with lots of masterpieces. I just kind of shut down. But I love looking at everyday objects, like when you go into some tiny museum, you see a bunch of Bronze Age fish hooks. And it's very clear that they are fish hooks, but it will be like, unknown Bronze Age implements. Like, it's a fish hook. Look at it. Just the connection of ancient and modern life. So one of the things was there was this grave for a dog. Someone had buried their dog, and he had little blue beads on the collar, which are apotropaic. They're for warding off evil. An ancient dog grave unearthed during construction of the Athens Metro. It is not the curled up bones, nor even the grave that stops me, but the blue beads on the collar, whose leather has long gone the way of hides, the ones to ward off evil. A careful master even now protects a favorite, just so. But what evil could she suffer after death? I picture the loyal companion, bereaved of her master, trotting the long, dark way that slopes to the river, nearly trampled by all the nations marching down one war after another, flood or famine, her paws sucked by the thick, colliginous mud, deep as her dew claws, near the riverbank. In the press for the ferry, who will lift her into the boat? Will she cower under the pier and be forgotten, forever howling and whimpering, tail tucked under? What stranger pays her passage? Perhaps she swims, dog paddling the current of oblivion. A shake as she scrambles ashore, sets the beads jingling, and then that last tense moment, touching noses once, twice, 3 times with unleashed Cerberus. I write a lot about the underworld. It's what poets do. But I have been asked about it in interviews, and over the years, I realized that my answers have been changing. I'm not sure they may be all correct, but I would say, oh, it's about death. Or at one point, I had this epiphany. I was like, it's about depression. And then I had a sort of third epiphany. It's like, I have spent almost my entire adult life living in basement apartments. So this is a, Persephone poem. We do those. It is also, I write almost exclusively in received forms. But I realized, kind of late in the game, I wish I'd realized this earlier, that a received form need not be a poetic form. Any form can be a received form. So this is a form those of you in academia or students will know quite well. It is First Love, a quiz. He came up to me, A, in his souped-up Camaro. B, to talk to my skinny best friend. C, and bumped my glass of wine so I wore the fairest stain on my sleeve. D, from the ground in a lead chariot drawn by a team of stallions black as crude oil and breathing sulfur. At his heart he sported a tiny golden arrow. He offered me A ride, B, dinner and a movie with a wink at the cliche, C, an excuse not to go back alone to the apartment with its sink of dirty knives, D, a narcissus with 100 dazzling petals that breathe the sweetness as cloying as decay. I went with him because A, even his friends told me to beware. B, I had nothing to lose except my virginity. C, he placed his hand in the small of my back and I felt the tread of honeybees. D, he was my uncle, the one who lived in the half-finished basement, and he took me by the hair. The place he took me to, A, was dark as my shut eyes. B, and where I ate bitter seed and became ripe. C, and from which my mother would never take me wholly back, though she wept and walked the earth and made the bearded ears of barley wither on their stalks and the blasted flowers drop from their sepals. D is called by some men hell and others love. E, all of the above. That's a really fun poem to read at high schools because it has the word virginity in it. That freaks people out. Speaking of freaking people out, maybe I should read a poem for my kids who are here and luckily not flinging themselves on the stage in attitudes of despair. This one is for Jason. Said, Mom. Listening to Peter and the Wolf with Jason, aged 3. He is now 14 and will be 15 on August the 2nd. Happy birthday. So this is Listening to Peter and the Wolf with Jason, aged 3. Eyes wide open, grinning ear to ear, balanced between the thrill of fear and fear. He clutches at my skirt to keep me near and will not let me leave him by himself in the living room where Peter and the Wolf emerges from the speakers on the shelf. He likes Peter's jaunty swing of strings, the reedy waddle of the duck, the wings that flute up in the tree, but still he clings even though for now it's just the cat picking its sneaky way through sharp and flat. He isn't frightened of a clarinet and laughs at grandfather's bluster and bassoon, but keeps his ear out for another tune at the shadowy edge of the wood and coming soon. Where is the wolf? He asks me every chance he gets, and I explain each circumstance, though it's not as if he's heard it only once. You'd think he'd know by now. Deep in the wood, or under the tree, or sent away for good to the zoo, I say, and think he's understood, and weary of the question and the classic, I ask him where the wolf is. With grave logic, he answers me, the wolf is in the music. And so it is. Just then, out of the gloom, the cymbal menaces, the French horns loom, and the music is loose. The music's in the room. So I did get something out of the music thing. Got all that vocabulary. Where is my book? So with the new book, which people have been very kindly buying and I've been inscribing, I kind of decided I didn't want to have the traditional sections of the poetry book. You know, have the 4 sections or the 5 sections. And I said, well, what would happen if I just put them in alphabetical order? And that seemed to work. So I was really happy about that. There were 2 poems that did not work in alphabetical order, and I changed their titles. You can do that. You're the poet. During the time when I was working on this, I was supposed to be working on a translation of Hesiod's Works and Days, and which is 8th century poem. We often think of Hesiod and Homer in the sort of same breath, and we think of Hesiod as perhaps being a little bit later. But the ancients thought of Hesiod as older. And I was working on this, and it's where we have the first version of the story of Pandora and the jar. And it took me a very long time to translate this ridiculously short 800-line poem. In fact, when I finally turned it into Penguin Classics, the editor, whom I will not name, she said, I didn't realize it was this short. I was like, yes, it has always been that short. It has never been longer than that. I will write a long introduction, which was true. But I was also just writing poems about Pandora. So I have 2 poems about Pandora in this book. One of them was requested, actually. I should read that one. So I'm reading this for Noah. Pandora. It's so easy, too. I just turn to P. Don't have to look at the index. It was the Iron Age. The men had been drinking. Those 2 surly brethren, hindsight and forethought, they sent her down to the cellar to fetch more booze, even though she'd murmured, you've both had enough. Forethought, at least, you'd think would eschew a hangover. But then he was always cocky. He'd filched sparks from the gods and hadn't, for guest nickname aside, the prank would backfire. His liver hadn't yet begun to creak as if an eagle tore it each morning. Hindsight, her husband, of course, remorsed their marriage. He'd said she was a punishment from Zeus, and that virginity made for a sorry dowry, depreciating soon as you drove it off the lot. There was just a dram in the drained keg, and that she thought she'd drink herself, dregs be damned. Broach a new cask, they were huge, a fathom tall, a man could drown in them, set deep in the floor so you could reach the mouth. She pried open the charactered seal with only her grappling fingers, but the wine had vinegared, or worse, what fumes, acrid, with notes of brimstone, flies belched out. Hindsight would give her what for tonight for sure. Ouch. Just then, the baby gave a disgruntled kick right behind where she would have had a belly button if she'd been born instead of just made up by poets. Hindsight hankered for sons, for more braces of hands for his failure of a farm, but if it were a daughter, she'd have some company and name her Heather maybe, or Hope. I have read a poem for Jason, so I should read one for Atalanta. Which is tricky because it's under 4 instead of Atalanta. I grew up in Atlanta. My mother is in Atlanta. And when the baby was born, we phoned up Atlanta and said that we had had the baby and her name was Atalanta, and there was a pause. And Nana said, but what are you going to call her? For Atalanta. Your name is long and difficult. I know. So many people whom we didn't ask have told us so and taken us to task. You too perhaps will wonder as you grow and blame us with the venom of 13 for ruining your life, using our own love against us keen as a double-bladed knife. Already I can picture the whole scene. How will we answer you? Yes, you are in a hurry to arrive, as if it were a race to be alive. We weighed the syllables and they rang true, and we were hoping too you'd come to like the stories of princesses who weren't set on shelves like china figurines, not allegories, but girls whose glories included rescuing themselves, slaying their own monsters, running free but not running away. It might be rough, singled out for singularity, tough. Beauty will be of some help, you'll see, but it is not enough to be nimble, brave, or fleet. O apple of my eye, the world will drop many gilded baubles at your feet to break your stride. Don't look down. Don't stoop to scoop them up. Don't stop. I will read a little bit of the translation, if I can find it in the pile. So again, Works and Days, it's 8th century BCE poem, which I thought was by this, old, curmudgeonly, gruff, misogynistic Greek dusty guy that didn't have anything to say to now. But it turned out I was so wrong. So I was translating him during the Greek economic crisis, and his topics are work and unemployment and justice and hunger and our right relation with the land and debt and all of these things. So it ended up being actually rather more topical than I realized. He's also the first, again, we think of him, Homer and Hesiod, kind of in the same breath. But, who is Homer? Nobody knows. He, she, they, we don't know. Hesiod, though, is the first poet in Western literature to give us a bio of himself. And in that bio, he includes that he has won a major prize. So things haven't changed very much. And he's also the first poet laureate. And the muses gave him his poetry stick, in person. He's an economic migrant in Greece. He lives in a small town named Askra, which is in Boeotia, which, even in English is a sort of byword for, not New York or Los Angeles. And so he's in Boeotia, this little town next to some beautiful mountains. And he says that it is miserable in summer and awful in winter and never nice any time of the year. But I think he just doesn't want a bunch of tourists coming there. And he also speaks of the beautiful mountains where he sets his beautiful prize. And one of the things he talks about is how poets relate to each other. And he talks about a bad strife, which is, war and so on, and a good strife, which is competition. And he talks about this strife is boon to man, and that's why in this life, potter hates potter, builder has no regard for builder, nor beggar, bard loathes bard. I don't think that's true, but maybe a little bit. And he gives us a lot of advice about things. Invite a friend, but not a foe, to feast. Invite the man close by, not last nor least. If something bad should happen on your farm, neighbors arrive half-dressed at the alarm, kinsmen belted. A bad neighbor's a curse, as a good one is a treasure. Nothing's worse. Who has a trusty neighbor, you'll allow, has a share in something precious. Nary a cow would be lost, but for bad neighbors. Keep good track when you measure from your neighbor. Pay him back good measure too. Better if in your power. You'll find him steadfast in a needful hour. Deposit even small amounts, but do it often, and you'll find that they accrue. He wards off sun-scorched famine who can add to what he has. To store at home's not bad, outside is risky. To take from what you've got is fine. To be in need of what you've not is woe to the spirit. Mind you, that's how things are. Drink deep from new broached or from near drained jar. Thrifts for halfway, but stingy at the end. Ensure a settled payment for your friend. Smile on a brother, but have a witness when trust and mistrust alike have ruined men. Don't let a woman mystify your mind with sweet talk and the sway of her behind. She's just after your barn. He who believes a woman is a man who trusts in thieves. May an only son shore up his father's walls, for that's how wealth amasses in the halls. May he die full of years and leave one heir as an only son in turn, though Zeus might spare untold wealth on bigger numbers, more hands, more chores done, and a fuller store. But if it's wealth you long for in your chest, then do this work on work and never rest. He goes on, but he's really angry with his brother. He's in a lawsuit with his brother, who he calls an idiot, and his brother's name is Perses, which basically means a wastrel. Think how to clear debts and not starve. You'll need a woman and an ox to start a life, a plowing ox, bondswoman, not a wife, one who can follow oxen and prepare the household's needs and management with care, lest you go begging and be turned away, and fruits of your labor dwindle day by day. Don't put off till tomorrow or till later. No barn is filled by a procrastinator. So he's fun. Read a few more poems. I spent many summer birthdays here in Sewanee. Summer birthday people? You know my sadness. Summer birthdays. You would learn in kindergarten there was one game you had no part in. Kings and queens of endless noons, you envied them, their golden rule and crowns of bright construction paper, the cupcakes, streamers, brave balloons, the breath and the expiring taper. Later, there were those at school whose invitation list would pique the class's interest for a week. Sleepovers where all was said or giggled about who liked whom, and anyone who left the room would have only herself to thank as butt of some unfunny prank. Sleep sneaked in at dawn. Instead, you always seemed to be at camp, slouched on a picnic bench, still damp from swimsuit bottoms next to one, your brief best only friend for 3 long weeks of forced hilarity. Arts and crafts and nature fun, you stared down at your ugly sandals, hating the song and the stupid candles. In the dog days playing dead, there still lies a sense of dread, something in you that accrues as you watch the summer blaze through the cyclopean days, the wine-dark sea of summer blues, fierce skies extinguished one by one when the dusk blows out the sun. Most everything you love was born at the cusp of harvest time, when the year was in its prime, before the autumn winds had torn the turning pages from the trees and rent the spider's thread of pride and brought the flowers to their knees. Every summer, like a tide, the anniversaries arrive unclockwise with the clockwork earth, sister, mother, daughter, son, yourself, and then the other one, your father, were he still alive. Every August you have cried when you celebrate his birth 10 days after he has died. And maybe it's not only Dad, but summer too, its vague alarm, another gone year's epitaph. The year still seems to start with school, fresh pencils, new hopes to be cool, while summer evenings late and sad and violet and moist and warm and fading like a mimeograph. Pencil. Once you loved permanence, indelible. You'd sink your thoughts in a black well and called the error ink. And then you crossed it out. You canceled as you went, but you craved permanence and honored the intent. Perfection was a blot that could not be undone. You honored what was not, and it was legion. And you were sure, so sure. But now you cannot stay sure. You turn the point around and honor the erasure. Rubber stubs the page, the heart a stiletto of lead, and all that was black and white is in between instead. All scratch, all sketch, all note, all tentative, all tensile, line that is not broken but pauses with the pencil, and all choice multiple, the quiz that gives no quarter, and time, the other implement that sharpens and grows shorter. So I'll read one more new poem and one last poem, which hopefully I can find in my printouts of poems. This one, that horrible moment. I will find it, which is dedicated to John, so it's very important that I find it. All right. I'll read another one instead. All right. Can I find the poem? Sad. It's about falling off horses. Darn it. Maybe you can find it. All right. In the meantime. Try to find it. Uh-oh. Maybe it's in the bag. Okay, I will read another one instead, and then a last one. This is also for John. So it turns out someone also pointed out that I have a lot of marital argument poems. And what was the deal with that? And I realized that I think arguments kind of put me into a poetic frame of mind. And then, you know, you can dedicate it to the person that you've been awful to. So that works. Okay. Swallows. I'll close with this. Every year, the swallows come and put their homestead in repair and raise another brood and skim and boomerang through summer air and reap mosquitoes from the hum of holidays, a handsome pair, one on the nest, one on the wire. Cheat, 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 the two conspire to murder half the insect race and feed them squirming to their chicks. They work and fret at such a pace, and natter in between with clicks and churs. They lift the raftered place, seaside taverna, with their tricks of cursive loops and Morse code call, both analog and digital. They seem to us so coupled, married, so flustered with their needful young, so busy housekeeping, so harried it's hard to picture them among the origins of myth, a buried secret, rape, a cut-out tongue, two sisters wronged where there's no right till transformation fledges flight. But Ovid swapped them in the tale so that the sister who was forced becomes instead the nightingale who sings as though her heart would burst. It's Ovid's stories that prevail, and thus the swallow is divorced twice from her voice, her tuneless chatter, and no one asks her what's the matter. These swallows, though, don't have the knack for sorrow, or we'd not have guessed. Those smartly dressed and tailored black spend no time mourning, do not rest. One scissors forth, one zigzags back. They take turns settled on the nest or waiting on a perch nearby to zero in on wasp or fly. They have no time for tragic song. As dusk distills, they dart and flicker. The days are long, but not as long as yesterday. The night comes quicker, and soon the season will be wrong. Knackered, cross, they bitch and bicker like you and me. They never learn, and every summer they return.